Welcome back to Actually Useful, the show where we diagnose what's wrong with the internet and we chat with the good folks who are trying to fix it. What's up, Josh? How you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy Pride, everyone. We're excited to be chatting with y'all today. And we have some horrifying news to get into to celebrate this month of love and dignity. Today, we're going to be talking about a super awesome article from The Verge, who is investigating this strange new AI internet feature for Meta AI, their standalone app. I didn't even know they had a standalone app.
Wait, I didn't know they did either.
Yeah, it's sometimes I don't know what the kids are up to, but I will say this ties in perfectly to the conversation we're going to be chatting about today. We're talking about kind of some changes to Google search that are a little concerning. But first, so Meta has launched this pseudo personalized internet feed for its users.
I'll comment too. We've been saying since this show started that we've known that Zuck is threatening us with antisocial social media, where he wants everyone to have an AI feed generated on the fly.
And it looks like they're taking the first steps towards that. So essentially you go into the FYP For You page for the Meta AI app, and it auto generates articles and images for those articles based on your interests. So if you are interested in health and fitness, maybe it's a weightlifting article about some new advances or techniques, but the header image will be completely AI generated. The copy of the article will be AI generated. And it's very hard to tell where it's pulling these sources from. The example they use in the article is this AI-generated discussion about whether tea should be served before or after milk in British culture. And the header image has 2 copies of Queen Elizabeth, the famously dead Queen Elizabeth. And maybe some AI depictions of other members of the royal family, but they all look a little bit off.
No, I can tell you 100% that they're AI generated, and I'll tell you why. I am face blind, okay? I do not recognize faces at all. That is not Kate Middleton. I can tell you right now.
Okay, you heard it here first.
That face is not Kate Middleton's face, so that is definitely an AI generated Kate Middleton.
The best part of this article is at the end when they say, when we reached out to Meta for comment, they said the feature would be immediately going away. So The Verge caught them trying to soft launch their antisocial social media, and they were we'll get rid of this, but who's believing that?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting article for today's topic, like Josh said, which is about the end of Google search, basically. But I think an interesting thing that you'll see Google has contributed to is all of the example of clickbait articles from this Meta AI generated feed, they all look like news. There's 3 iterations of clickbait, and I think they really say something about where we're at culturally and what's important to us. The original clickbait was akin to a tabloid in a checkout line at a grocery store, where it was very sensationalized pictures. In the late 2000s, in the late aughts, they did a lot of clickbait that was essentially look at Jennifer Lopez fat in a bikini, or stupid shit like that. The same type of shit you would have seen on a tabloid, and it was always at the bottom of your actual article or whatever. Then there was an era where clickbait was the BuzzFeed quizzes, where it was which member of Sex and the City are you? And then now I think it's really interesting that clickbait is all news. It is the newsification of clickbait, where they make it every picture in this AI generated feed, the headline is as if it is news, right? And now they're moving into this interface where it looks like it's a chat prompt. The next iteration is going to be everything looks like it's a prompt from your AI best friend, right? So it's very interesting what clickbait sort of coalesces around, because there's at any given time, clickbait is not particularly diverse in terms of what it looks like. And so it really does tell you about what the internet's attention span is on in what type of format they're choosing for clickbait. By the way, I just came up with that off the cuff. That was an insight I just came up with.
I think we should leave that in. You popping off. Yeah. So I actually think that's kind of a perfect segue into our conversation today, because we're going to be talking about the end of Google search as we know it. We've covered this briefly in some episodes before, but Google has announced they're doing a big shift away from, the 10 blue links towards AI generated answers with God knows how much misinformation baked in. And so we wanted to give you guys kind of a history of Google search and why this is going to be so transformative and potentially really destabilizing for not just the internet, but kind of culture as we know it. So because I am not a dinosaur, I was thinking of passing off this next section to my co-host Ariel to explain what the pre-Google internet looked like. Take it away.
Yeah, Josh was born after Google. Before Google, there was not a tremendous amount of internet. There was like the secret internet first, and then there was like technical people internet, and then there was like
the gay internet with Alan Turing.
There was actually the gay internet with Alan Turing. So in 1992, if you wanted to surf the internet, there was no World Wide Web. So there used to be different protocols. The two that were most commonly used were Gopher and FTP. You had people who were probably employed as technologists, but were like certifiable nerds who had access. These are people who were like building their own PCs. We all know the type. You knew somebody's dad as a child who was an early user of Gopher or FTP. So Gopher is still in use somewhat nostalgically, like for fun these days. And then file transfer protocol, you as a user on the internet have definitely retrieved a document using FTP. You just haven't known it. So that is still very much around. The way that they worked basically is they were essentially closed systems. So not dissimilar to today, where you have like an application, like you have your Google Chrome application that opens the browser, which allows you to then have access to Google searches, documents, which are like essentially all hosted in the cloud, right? So back in the day, you would have an installed application that was installed, either came with your computer, installed to your computer, you went out and physically bought it. Remember back in the day, AOL would send you a physical CD in early internet surfing. They would send you a physical CD. That was how applications were installed pre-cloud. Before the cloud, you can't just like go online and get it delivered to you. So anyway, so functionally, it was kind of the same system. It's just that there was no concept of like search. There was no concept of cloud storage, and there were not a lot of people on it. So when you were using your Gopher like terminal, your Gopher application, you're accessing other people's servers that have opened up, hey, I've got a set of documents that I'm going to, allow you to browse. Now, this is probably not the most technical way to describe this, but that is functionally how it worked. There were a lot of innovations very, very quickly between 1993 and like 1996-ish. June to December of 1993 saw some of the most important advancements in what would eventually bring us to a searchable internet that was accessible by most people. So the first web bot was built in 1993. The original web bot was a counter. It just tried to count how many web pages are on the internet, because we didn't even know that yet. So first web crawler, 1993. I think later that year, you end up getting some dabbling in natural language processing. So even the early web, so Yahoo, Lycos, Ask Jeeves, they looked like search pages, but they were actually directories. Were like very similar to the Gopher system, where it's like you are looking through essentially an index of different pages that have been listed as relevant. So like if you would go to like Yahoo's homepage, which the word Yahoo is actually an acronym that refers to its origins as a directory of the web. It stands for Yet Another Hierarchical Officious Oracle. It's a tongue-in-cheek reference to the fact that it was yet another, essentially god of the machine, being like, hey, you want pages that are relevant? Come to Yahoo. So like the way they competed with each other back in the day was that they would have more comprehensive or more, easy to use directories. The prototype of Google search started in 1995, and then I'll pass this to Josh to give some history. But there were essentially like the pre-Google internet it did have a web bot. It did have natural language processing starting, where it was like, instead of just searching for a direct keyword match in the directory, it was starting to have some understanding of like semantic similarity or syntax, right? But you still had to use Boolean operators. So like you couldn't just put a space, you'd have to put like an and or an or the way that people would look through like academic directories these days. I guess the last thing I'll say too is pre-Google, there was kind of this phenomenon of like, it was coalescing into a Yahoo, Lycos, Ask Jeeves, but there were also like dudes on like, there were just like people on the internet. Like sometimes when you like Craigslist is kind of a holdover from this of like, there used to just be directories of like expertise where, you know, Josh would be known as an expert in whatever his subject is, and he'd make a publicly accessible directory of sort of like a bibliography of all the pages that were relevant to that interest. And you'll see we'll circle back to with the end of Google search, we're going to end up finding that human run directories by experts ends up becoming more important. So Josh, do you want to tell us about how Google came in and started to change the game?
So before we fully move out of the Stone Ages, we have a pretty big problem that needs to be addressed here, which is that you have all these different disparate web pages with articles, blog posts, businesses, personal accounts. How do you make sense of this all? How do you rank which results are going to show up first? If you're trying to find Domino's, the international pizza chain, you're going to want that to pop up when you Google Domino's. You're not going to want a instruction manual for how to play the game Domino's from like 1987 to pop up. And so to sort through this, the founders of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, turned to this concept from academia, where with academic papers, a useful proxy for how reliable that piece of work is how many other academic papers cite that particular article. So if you have produced this really groundbreaking study in the field of biology, and you have hundreds of other biologists around the world citing your work, that's probably a pretty credible research paper. On the other hand, if you're a quack publishing something in some really, low value publication and no one is citing your work, then that's probably pretty low credibility. And so they apply this idea to the internet, where if you have an article from the New York Times that's getting cited by hundreds, if not thousands of other websites, and they're all linking to that New York Times article, it's probably a pretty credible source. Whereas if you have someone's reporting on the exact same news story, but it's coming from their personal blog that gets 3 visitors a month and no one's linking to it, that's probably not very credible. And so this is a huge breakthrough in sorting the open internet and all this vast amount of content to get through. And so PageRank is born. This is the rank that pages show up when you Google them. And it's that 10 blue links that we've all come to know over the past few decades. Now, obviously, we talk a lot on this show about enshittification, and the common through line is that at the very beginning of the enshittification curve, the product is genuinely good. Like it's very useful for its users. And so in the beginning, there is no enshittification of Google, as hard as it is to believe. A lot of these researchers are coming out of academia, and they're driven by this mission to like genuinely try and sort all of human knowledge. The founders go as far to say that they will never put ads on Google, because if you start letting people buy advertising space and buy higher and higher rankings, well, then your whole revolutionary algorithm that is supposed to look at the reliability of sites breaks down. If I can suddenly spend, millions of dollars to have my crappy personal blog outbid the New York Times for ad slots, you start to break down a lot of people's ability to access high quality information. Now, eventually this is all going to change and become the pile of steaming hot shit we know today. But at the time, it's important to know that Google just worked, and it was pretty incredible.
And so let's get into how Google's search algorithm works, because the way that it works is extremely informative to what the fuck has happened to the internet, because it all happened because of the way that Google's search algorithm works. For context, I obviously have been a product manager for many years. A substantial portion of my work has been in the SEO industry, in the search engine optimization industry. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. So when you think about Google search, there are 3 pieces to Google search. There is crawling, indexing, and ranking. Crawling asks, can Google find your web page? Indexing asks, does Google know where to put your web page in its directory? And does it know that it's worth keeping? So like, does it know what information is on there? And then ranking is how easy is it for an end user to find your web page in a relevant Google search? The idea that Google has been peddling for years is that every aspect of their search algorithm and all of the updates that they make is all to favor a better internet for end users. So they say that the choices that they make as a company when it comes to Google search is all about making websites that are authoritative, concise, well written, well designed, good UX. Like they are saying that they heavily weight the results towards websites that are better for consumers. Okay, so let's go through each of these pieces. So crawling. It's not possible for any web crawler to crawl every single page on the internet every moment of the day. There has got to be a system to it. And if you've ever used the Wayback Machine, archive.org, and you've put in a URL that isn't in their archive and you've hit like go get that, that's an example of like, hey, they have a web crawler that's going out and making a bunch of choices about what they should be archiving on the internet, but they can't get to everything. So like part of the way Wayback Machine works is it is hoping that by someone looking for this article in the archive, in the internet archive, that that's a signal that they should go out and get it. So similarly, Googlebot has to make choices about what pages it's going to crawl, how often it's going to crawl them, and like even within a single website, what should be prioritized. So it looks at a couple things when it thinks about crawling. The number one thing it looks at, the number one signal supposedly that they look at for anything is what's called domain authority. So that is how old is the main domain on your website and how much traffic does it get? Age is a big factor. That is why it is one of the reasons it's very hard to start a business, is that like it's very hard to start a website. It's hard to get your website to get crawled, to get it to start showing up. Domain authority is super important. And that's another reason why you often see these days businesses never really die. They get like repoed and sent to somewhere else. It's because they still have value in that domain authority. They look at other stuff too, traffic volume, bounce rate, but it is basically trying to guess which pages are most important. And the way that it makes choices between different domains across all of the different domains on the internet is domain authority. So like Amazon will get crawled more often than Josh's Hat Warehouse, you know, and Amazon.com, the main homepage, is going to get crawled a lot more often than Amazon.com/results/hats/Josh's hats hat for podcasting. You know, it's going to get, it knows that like some
Why
of these
do I
pages,
have like a hat merch empire?
I don't know. I was just thinking
She
of
did
a
not run
random
this by me before this show.
I shout out to Chad, my mentor, back in the day, whenever we would work together and he would try to make a point about like a small and meaningless store, he would say Chad's pen store. So he would always say Amazon will get more than Chad's pen store. And so this is spiritually nodding to Chad's pen store.
I think I could come up with a better name than Josh's Hats for
well,
podcasting.
That's my point. You did a bad job. You're not getting any domain leakage in the naming of your namespace. So, so anyway, Josh's Hat Store is not getting any action at all. This is not just like left completely up to chance or up to Googlebot. As a site owner, you can try to direct Googlebot's resources. So you can do a couple of different things. People who make websites leave explicit instructions for search bots in the website. There's a couple of different ways. There's a sitemap called an XML sitemap where it shows exactly the directions of like what pages are on your website. There's a metadata called robots.txt where you can literally tell Google, hey, don't index this page. Examples of when you would do that. Like I have worked on websites that have millions of pages. We don't want Googlebot wasting its time trying to index pages that get like 12 hits a year. Like we don't care about that showing up in Google results. So we'll tell it with robots.txt, hey, don't index this page. This page doesn't matter. On some products I've worked at that have millions of pages, we've tried to say like 90% of the pages are like, Google, you don't need to go here. It's not that important, right? Another thing is like which pages are canonical. So it tries to get rid of duplicates, right? So that's that example I gave of like Amazon.com versus Amazon.com / a long and specific string. We don't need to be like indexing page 39 of a very specific search query. You just need the top level page. So there are all these instructions that you can put in that try to dictate how Google crawls your page. So then for indexing, same thing. There's a bunch of different signals that you use. Indexing is trying to figure out what is on your page and where does it go. So it uses breadcrumbs, those things at the top of a page where it says like home dash results dash cosmetics dash whatever. Those are breadcrumbs. It
Not
uses
to be confused with the male manipulator dating tactic.
Exactly, which did come up in our last episode, but this is a different type of breadcrumbing. It has copy text, product descriptions, meta tags, anything that is text that's either visible to an end user or is in the metadata, the data about the data that's on the back end that Google can see. We leave lots of instructions for actual web crawlers. An example of where indexing gets messy is like if you search Star Wars, Google search results is going to assume that what you want is like news, IMDb, like you're looking for top level information about Star Wars, the franchise, right? Versus if you searched Lego Star Wars, it's going to assume that you are looking for product pages, like you're looking for like Lego products to buy. That assumption has to do with indexing. So like it's not just like slapping a blanket on the whole internet and trying to figure out like what's going to shake out. It is actually starting when you first type Star Wars or Lego Star Wars, it's like, what section of the internet do I go to? And it's going to decide, do I want news or do I want products, right? So like it needs these sort of top level directions. And then with ranking, this is where it starts to make a lot of assumptions about what, supposedly makes a good user experience. So there's a bunch of things called core web vitals, and you get scored on them. And you can like get reports from Google Search Console to see if you're doing it well or not. And you can pay lots of specialists to try to make it better. So there's all kinds of things. They call cumulative layout shift. So that's like when you load a page, how many elements are actually moving. When you load a recipe and there's like all these things load all at the same time, right? It's not supposed to do that. That's called cumulative layout shift. Largest contentful paint. That means how long does it take to render the very first image? Lots of things around timing. Page speed is a really big factor. And they try to say that like they're prioritizing pages that are clear, that don't have crap that's clearly made for the Google bot, that is like good to use. Now, they also do like content freshness, content relevance. So they'll say like they want your page to be updating regularly. It depends on the content, right? A news site should have a really high content freshness rate, whereas a historical archive might not have nearly as fresh of a content freshness rate. They're looking for relevance, et cetera, et cetera. Now that I've said all that, let's unpack this a little bit. So Google has told us for years that the choices that they make, just for context, they deploy like 15,000 updates to their algorithm in a year. Like they deploy changes to their search algorithm all day, every day. A lot of them are going to be minute changes, but they release big updates that have names that are like announced usually like 10 times a year, like between like 6 and 12 times a year. They'll release like really big updates. They usually do not give you any warning. And it's like reverse Christmas morning. You wake up and you're like, oh, fuck, my site has 50% less traffic than it did the day before. If you as a user want to debunk Google's myth that the choices that they make are in favor of the user experience, you can do this with one Google search. Just search any recipe. Literally any recipe ever. And the very first result that you get, do things move on the page? Is the copy text all relevant? Is the story about her childhood by the river when her dad died relevant to the blueberry muffin recipe that you're actually looking for? It's going to move around a lot. It's going to load really fucking slowly. The anchors are not going to work. It's a piece of shit. Every single recipe page you've ever seen is a piece of shit. Doesn't matter how good it is. They're all fucking terrible. And they show up first. And so it's like, really, Google, you're prioritizing this because the 40 video ads that load directly over the measurements makes a better user experience for me. It's not like because all of those 40 ads are being sent through your ad exchange, right? That's not why you put this recipe first, right? What this looks like for businesses. The SEO industry is a $200 billion industry. There are more products, consultancies, specialists, freelancers than you can possibly imagine to try to game, literally, explicitly, to game the Google search algorithm. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but like 92% of searches happen on Google search, or like 92% of traffic happens on Google search, and like 7% happens on Bing, and like less than 1% on like Kagi, DuckDuckGo, whatever, anything else you want to search on, right? So like Google owns the whole market. And so your business actually lives and dies by the traffic that Google can provide for you. And it's such a thing that like these are enormous departments inside companies. And I have worked on this for years. And I have said from the beginning that search engine optimization is like praying to a God you know does not exist, because it does not matter what you do. You have no agency and no control over what they're doing to your page. So I will give you a couple examples of things I've built just to try to game the Google search algorithm. Because there's tools to audit your pages, there's tools to make suggestions, whatever. So some things I built. I built an internal linking tool where if we had thousands of pages that we were managing on behalf of big brands. They call this link juice, by the way. The official phrase is link equity. But in the SEO industry, if you hear someone say link juice, it's referring to those that link equity that Josh referenced of like backlinks being an extremely important part of how they think something is relevant. So internal links are also important. Like they're not as important as backlinks. There's whole businesses that can buy you fake backlinks where like they keep a content farm of essentially a dead domain that had some domain authority and they sell off sort of fake backlinks to get traffic. I've done that, but internal, where I'm managing a bunch of pages for different brands and I have a brand that's mad at us. So I need to get a bump in traffic to Josh's hat store. And so I'll link it to our Amazon page because I know that our Amazon page is going to get the most traffic. And so literally just by like having a tool where I can like, select the store ID for Josh's hat store and be like, give this one all the juice today. It'll show up on all my pages that get the most traffic. And all of a sudden you'll see a natural boost to how often Josh is showing up in PageRank, therefore how much traffic we're getting to that page. I built a content freshness score. So the goal in general is that 20% of the content of your page changes every single day. So we wrote an algorithm that scored how much of the page was different in the last 24 hours and then made programmatic recommendations of what could change in like the easiest way possible to just check the box that it's like 20% is fresh. In terms of domain authority, when I worked in affiliate marketing, just moving our coupon content away from our editorial content by moving it to a subdomain literally 5x'd traffic. Everybody got their bonuses that year just from like that migration took us like 3 weeks. And I mean, it substantially changed the output of the business. It's all short-lived too, because the next time they go to do an update, it'll fuck you anyway. So there have been many examples of Google search updates directly resulting in the death of businesses. Most of the time it's small businesses that are getting substantial amounts of traffic from Google search anyway, but like a lot of content websites that will like I've worked through multiple layoffs that were directly a result of money lost because Google updated their search algorithm. And they never tell you anything. They never tell you what they're changing. They never tell you what they're penalizing. They give you like PR language of like, oh, we made this update to try to like punish content farms and reward natural, organic, user-generated content. And it's like, fine, but again, the recipe example, like you don't see that reflected in your experience on the internet.
And so a lot of this stuff is really technical, and that's why Ariel, the much smarter host of this podcast, went through all the important stuff. But we do want to bring this back to like, how does this impact our day-to-day lives? Well, because we all use Google, because we all rely on the internet for basically everything in our lives now, these decisions that they make are actually really impactful in our lives, even at like the neurochemistry level. So the way Google makes money from all this content and these changes to its algorithm is that every time you click a link that has advertising on it, right? Google gets a piece of that. And so they don't really give a shit how long you spend on each individual site. If you click 10 articles trying to find information, they get paid 10 times. If you click one article to find that information and you get the answer on your first try, they just lost all this revenue that they could be getting if they make you spend more time rooting around trying to find the answer. And so like when people talk about AI is killing Google killed Google.
Google absolutely
like
killed
Google
Google.
by instituting all these monetization strategies that they said from the very beginning they were never going to do. That has degraded this product that used to be the repository of like all human knowledge that you could search very easily into this steaming pile of shit. This is one of the most depressing parts of the story. In their charter was the phrase don't be evil. And they took that shit out of their
Yep, they
charter around the same time that they started enshittifying Google. And so like all this click farming that incentivizes us to click around to different web pages instead of spending time on one article and really like absorbing something, that's changed our attention spans. We now like talk about TikTok ruining our ability to focus on things. But long before that, Google was saying, here, check this hyperlink, look around at this website. Doesn't this look interesting? They have been the kind of shiny object retraining our brains for well over 2 decades at this point. Process changed not only our brains, but the way we get news. This is one of the biggest through lines as Google has become enshittified, is that our ability to run a democracy, to exist in a society, is slowly breaking down as people don't have access to news that they trust. Now, the whole picture of exploring, you know, the consolidation of news enterprises, monopolies that have grown, you know, the rise of Fox News, all these things, that's a bit out of the scope of a tech podcast. But we do want to give you just a bit of the history here of how Google and similarly Meta have completely degraded the news business. And so in the early internet, you have physical newspapers who are suddenly trying to figure out how to adapt. And they create their own pages, but they also look around to see what's popular. They notice that Facebook is starting to get a lot of heat. So they start posting some of their content on Facebook, they make pages on Facebook, and they start driving more users to the site. Now, at the time, this seems like a great idea. I'm sure lots of marketing executives were getting lots of nice bonuses for expanding their presence on Facebook. But the consequence of this is that instead of building their online presences and making the homepage of a, you know, the most popular newspaper in Albuquerque, New Mexico, making that a destination for the people of Albuquerque, New Mexico, they start accidentally fueling their competition by sending more and more people to Facebook. So as they fuel this, more people surf their Facebook homepages instead of searching out articles from The Guardian or The New York Times. This has slowly led to the death of legacy media as Facebook has become greedier and greedier, pushing publishers to allow more and more of their content for free online. And as Google has given you more and more of a mini blurb of each of these articles online for free, instead of having to subscribe to The Guardian or The New York Times or what have you. So even pre-AI, these legacy companies are getting squeezed until we see that a third of weekly and daily newspapers that existed 20 years ago have gone out of business. Google and Facebook end up gobbling up all the advertising dollars and letting publishers fend for themselves. Facebook briefly tried to institute a news page and then immediately took that away and rug pulled the industry yet again. And now AI answers that are going to give away information for free are just going to starve these organizations of the ability to pay journalists to create the information that fuels AI in the first place.
But I also will say, before we get into Google's AI results, which is where this is leading to, this competition that Google and to some extent Facebook did in trying to get your attention to the link that they wanted, or like when Google put the snippet in the news, the natural result of this type of competitive arms race for attention in the top spot on Google search result has somewhat inadvertently trained us socially to only click on the first result, to just accept as truth result one. I will say, back in the day, you know, we started this with like pre-Google. So I was talking to like a childhood friend of mine. When I was in 4th grade, we had like computer lab time once a week that trained us how to use the computer. And a huge piece of it was using search engines. And like at the time, because we were using it in an educational context, like it was all the work was essentially being able to like look at a website and see whether it's credible or not. And so there was a whole period of using search engines where like the value and the way that you used it was very much about comparing different websites' information and like compiling them into a final narrative. And we have gotten so far away from that in the competition to try to get your attention to be on the click that they want. And just to give you some numbers on this, so let's say even before they started doing like the Gemini overview or whatever, on a normal like 2023 set of Google page results, there are like 10 links, the classic 10 links. The link 1 gets 25 times the amount of clicks as link 10 on page 1. Now, Josh, would you like to guess what percentage of clicks are on page 2 of search results or later?
I don't know, 3%?
0.65% of total clicks happen on page 2 or later.
Sweet.
So you have this world where like Google is incentivizing you to accept the very first result as the most authoritative and most useful result. So they're already consolidating all traffic into the one that they want to prioritize at the top. And now we're moving into AI results where now they don't need anyone to be in the middle of between them and your answer that they would like to feed you.
So the final evolution of this enshittification curve is now AI search. So we've all seen the first rollout of this, which is that when you Google a question, you get a little AI snippet at the top. Well, unfortunately, that's going to become a bigger and bigger part of the page. Google has announced recently, we got this information from an excellent TechCrunch article, but they are essentially going to be rolling out interactive AI experiences for every Google query. So instead of the simple list of links that has been the internet as we know it for 20 years, Google's now going to drop users into, quote, AI-powered interactive experiences. So you Google, how do black holes work? And instead of linking to a scientific article explaining it, it creates an AI virtual experience explaining how black holes suck matter in, and it shows you AI-generated images and videos. I mean, fine, that's a perfectly innocuous example, but what if that's health information, or you're trying to find like important tax information during tax season, or you're trying to find, vaccine information for the reliability of vaccines. And all of a sudden, this hallucination machine that we've talked about, how it gets things wrong constantly, is just going to be spitting up garbage instead of the Google search results that we've all come to rely on.
Well, also, like, showing me a black hole interactively does not answer the question, what is a black hole?
This is also going to finish the process of just killing legacy media. If we allow this to exist, as traffic goes down to the actual websites that produce this information, Google is just going to cannibalize all of that advertising revenue. And this finishes the process that's been playing out for years as the traditional legacy news infrastructure has tried to compete with the internet. So to sum up, we've gone from this revolutionary technology that was supposed to be the way of accessing all the combined ingenuity of the human experience and produce any information that you could possibly want into an enshittified AI, glitchy, unreliable pile of shit. It's honestly pretty grim, and we really don't know where to go from here, but we do want to leave you guys with some alternatives in the meantime while we try to figure this out.
So the most obvious non-Google free, easy to access browser that does not have this problem is DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo runs on Bing's search algorithm. I don't know. I have not used Bing in a long time. I worked with Bing for a while, but I don't know if they're enshittified the same way Google is. But Google's search algorithm is fine. It's still the best in the business. It's the interface that Google puts on top of it that makes it unusable. There is still a working Google search algorithm under that. That's actually what Kagi uses, which I would also recommend. Kagi we've referenced them multiple times, but they're a paid search engine, browser, AI tool, whatever. And they do it. They're just you pay us $5 a month and then we will not enshittify this. So yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of it. I don't think people are happy with Google's AI switch, but be aware that they have been training you to make it difficult. And so there is going to be some friction. And I just think from a simple getting information in a user experience that's that's nice to use. I don't think that the new Google AI results are going to provide that for people. So I don't think it's going to work out.
May they lose all their advertising and switch back immediately.
Yep.
Well, we are slowly becoming more and more slap happy, so I think we should probably go Falcon mode.
Yeah, let's go Falcon mode. I wonder if this Falcon sound is going to sound the same as the other Falcon sound that I've done. Let's go.
So Falcon Mode is our listener submitted segment where we take a listener submitted idea or a problem. We chat about how to make it more usable, feasible, or fundable. So today, listener Jenny writes, I'm a first-time homeowner and sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. I would love an app that tells me when to do specific home maintenance tasks like changing the air filters or cleaning the gutters and seasonal things like preparing my house for icy weather. Is there an app for that?
Yes, there is, Jenny. They're not great, unfortunately. Also, this is funny. I don't know anything about home ownership, so I did have to get a little creative in trying to imagine what tasks might be the examples to be using in this, but I did do a bunch of research. It seems like there are a ton of apps out there and that they are quite feature bloated. The fact that there are so many out there suggests to me that not only are you not the only person who has desired such an app, but also that no one's doing it great. If there's not there's not like a household name that I think is synonymous with this. So definitely some room to innovate a little bit. Let's talk first. I want to get into like what this would look like. So I think that at its simplest, it's essentially like a pre-built checklist that is specific for the type of home you own and where you live. So some examples, things that you would want to have in this app are like time to test the smoke detectors, time to test the outlets, time to check the attic, inspect the roof, inspect the water heater. I don't know what people with homes do. There are differences depending on where you live. I think this is where like, if I were to own a home tomorrow, if I like inherited a home tomorrow, I don't even know where to start. But also where you live, like by this question, seasonal things like preparing my house for icy weather. I'm assuming that you live somewhere where there's icy weather. But like Josh and I live on the coast, coastal homes experience a whole bunch of different maintenance tasks that are needed. So like if you need to prepare for icy weather, there's a whole bunch of stuff you got to do with your pipes before the ice comes and you don't want to have 24 hours notice. Same thing with coastal homes. Coastal homes have to get washed of salt every year. Living by the ocean will like degrade a house really quickly. You have to get the joints lubricated, like all kinds of weird stuff if you own a house near the coast. If you have a yard, there's a whole bunch of stuff you have to do with your yard, especially if you have like irrigation or anything. If you have an older home, there's like totally different things you need to do that might have specialized needs and specialized services. What I think would be useful on top of having a checklist, like there's a couple things here. It should know. So you should be able to plug in what type of house you have. Ideally, like honestly, your address. And then it should be like, yeah, I know this house. I know what is in this house and what this yard is. Like plug in your address. And then it'll make some suggestions. I think also what would be helpful is like a risk scale. So for example, you got to clean out your gutters and you have to clean out your chimney. But if you don't clean out your gutters, depending on where you live, within a year to 3 years, you will experience flooding, right? It's a slow problem. You can go a weekend without cleaning out your gutters and you'll be fine. Like nothing bad's going to happen. But if you don't unclog your chimney flue, it will either set your house on fire or send a bunch of toxic smoke directly into your living room. So like that's the kind of thing where you would want to know, hey, before you do anything, if you're going to light any kind of fire, you need to clean out the chimney flue. Now, there are some options out there. The two biggest ones that come to mind that showed up in all the results are Home Beacon and Home Zada, Z-A-D-A. They're both roughly $100. Home Beacon is $10 a month. Home Zada is $99 a year. I think those are both honestly too expensive. And they have a bunch of other features that are about like home maintenance or whatever. I think the lowest way to do this, if all you actually want is like something to tell you what tasks need to be done and when, and not necessarily if they're done correctly or how to do them or whatever, I think you can plug in your address. You can plug in some variables about your house into an AI chatbot, tell them what you want, and get a spreadsheet back. And then if you really want to go above and beyond, take your spreadsheet to like a general contractor, or you could just hire a general contractor to do this and be like, can you look at my list? Is this the right thing? Or you could get like your dad to look at it. I don't know. Ultimately, like to some extent, I was just talking to my mom about like there is this whole gap for like generational knowledge. I'm on this tear that like in LA we have like repair hours at libraries. Like you can go to the library and bring something that you need repaired, and there's like people there who are really good at repairing things and can walk you through repairing, and it's just like a city resource to be able to repair things. We've got to have more of that. Like we need like a carpenter that I can just like go ask a question. Like I don't live near my dad, guys. Like some people don't have someone in their family that knows basic carpentry. Like I want to go ask someone a question, you know?
Shout out to the incredible YouTube account Dad How Do I?
Yes.
Which is this guy who grew up without a dad and so made it his mission to teach people how to do things like common handiwork around the house, things with cars, that sort of stuff, so that no one has to experience what he had to deal with. And it's honestly very wholesome and makes you feel really happy. It's one of the most actually useful parts of the internet.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah. So, Jenny, I think there's a lot of options here to just get a list if you can be trusted to actually carry out the list. But I don't know if I would necessarily pay $100 a year for one of these apps. So it could be good room for innovation if you want to make like a low code reminder app. If you're a listener and you have ideas of problems you have that maybe technology could solve, or you're looking for a specific app because the ones that are available are all too stupid and you'd like a better recommendation, you can hit us up on most social media at actuallyusefulpod, or you can email us at heyactuallyuseful@gmail.com. We like to hear from our listeners.
And we hope everyone has a wonderful couple weeks. Enjoy Pride. Happy Pride, everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Bye. Actually Useful is part of the Industry Plant Podcast Network. It's co-hosted and created by Ariel Butters and co-hosted, produced, and edited by Josh Stretton Carlson. If you like the show, please consider subscribing to our Substack or YouTube, or give us a follow on most social media platforms at Actually Useful Pod.